Okay everyone, welcome to the first in our new programme of monthly artist talks, which are going to be taking place hopefully the third Wednesday of each month. And we've got a winter programme that's been advertised on our social media channels, and we're also putting together the programme for the spring and the summer 2024. So if anyone knows anyone who might be interested in taking part or would be interested in doing a talk themselves, please do get in touch. Today is our first artist talk, and the speaker is Mercedes Fonfria, who will be speaking about creativity. So I'll hand over now to Mercedes.
Right. Well, hello, and thank you for coming, and thank you to the art gallery. I think this is part of community and engagement activities, and I think it is a very valuable activity to engage the community in the activities of the art gallery. Now, who am I? And what are my qualifications to talk about creativity? I am not an artist. In fact, my profession is psychotherapy. I am a psychotherapist, but I like art. And I was saying to Andrew that the first place we go, any city we go to, is the Museum or Art Gallery. I just love art. And coincidentally, I was working, one of the settings for my work was in Birmingham, the health and safety department, which was in the jewellery portal, which meant that at lunchtime I would have little trips to the shops, and I would buy a pair of earrings or some kind of cheap jewellery, not diamonds. And they had classes, jewellery making classes, which I attended, and just for fun, because I thought it was good. And to my surprise, I found it quite stressful. I didn't understand why it was so stressful for me. And I realized that what was happening is that in the phase of a new activity, our anxieties get mobilized. So I thought, so if this happens to me, this might happen to other of my colleagues. And as you know, in counseling and psychotherapy, an element of training is kind of self-development, as it were. So you need to look at yourself and see what your strengths and weaknesses are. So I discussed it with a colleague, and I said, do you think this might be of interest to other psychotherapists? And she said, yes, I think that's brilliant. So I've run similar workshops to this for counsellors, psychotherapists, and for artists, for those interested in creativity. So this is my background, and these are my credentials to give this talk. So let's start. I love Claire, but what I liked particularly, the reason I chose him to start with is his words. He says, art does not imitate nature, it reveals it. And that's exactly what therapy does. Therapy reveals something that is not known, that might be bothering us, and it might enhance our creativity. So, if you look at this picture, you might say, that's not reality, that's not figurative. But actually, what is happening, what he is getting to, is that there are different layers of reality. So he has access to different layers of reality, and I think he is revealing his concept of reality in this picture, and I love it. I personally love it. Yeah. And obviously, I want to be here at the front to see you, but I cannot be at the computer. So Andrew is helping me. Now, I'm not an expert in art, in any art, not in visual arts either. So the focus of the talk will be psychoanalytic concepts of creativity. And creativity in a wider sense, not just of the arts, but creativity in a wide context, as I will explain. So, what I will try to cover is the impulse. Why do we want to create? Play is a very important element of creativity, and Adam Phillips, a psychoanalyst, talks about it. Now, very important, very central in creativity is the reparative element of creativity, how it repairs the internal object, which I will describe later. Now, inspirations, where do we get inspirations for creation? And I will look at a couple of artists, Tracy Emin and Louis Bourgeois, and their journey in terms of creativity and the element of reparation. And obstacles, so what gets in the way of our creativity, and hopefully to open up new vistas on the subject and our own creativity. So, as I said, I'm not thinking about art, I'm thinking about any creation. And creation is making something. We create something, we make something. Creativity is about transformation and making something into something else. It's a form of expression. Many artists use the art, whether it's music, whether it's visual arts, whether it's writing literature, to express themselves, to repair, as I said, and to discover. Because when you engage in creation, you discover things that you didn't know you knew, or you discover things that you didn't know you wanted to do. And it's problem solving, very important. Creativity is not about making beautiful things, it's about solving problems. I don't know if you listen to Jim Al-Khalili on Tuesdays, I think it's called The World Scientific. And what delights me is that scientists talk about being creative and having a creative dream, because dream as well. You need to be imaginative in order to solve problems. Now, what do you think that is?
A mountain.
Yes. I think so. I think it's a beautiful mountain, and maybe a sun of a moon. I think it's a beautiful picture. However, it's not. It is an advert for a clothing company, and I saw this. I think, well, you know that creative people are hoarders. They just kind of hoard anything they can. So I saw this, and yes, it is a beautiful garment, but it is quite an expensive make. So I wasn't going to buy it, but I just liked it, and I just transformed the advert to a picture. So to me, that is creativity. That's what we do when we create things. We transform, and we transform realities. Now, if you're lucky, for you, creativity is fun because it's play, and play in the widest and deepest sense of the word. Play is not just for kiddies, play is for all of us. We play within, we play in relationships, we play in our relationship with the world. So, Adam Phillips, as I said, is a psychoanalyst and works, or rather studies the work of Winnicott. Are you familiar with Winnicott? I suppose women particularly, and the mothering, kind of the good mother, the good enough mother. So what Winnicott was the word pediatrician, and became a psychoanalyst for children particularly. So what he suggests, Winnicott suggests that the creative activity is the search for the self. So we all need to know ourselves. And I don't know if you've heard the expression of, gosh, I didn't know. Like, for example, in extreme situations, in crisis, some people say, I didn't know how I would react, and I didn't imagine that I would react that way. So we are a bottomless pit of elements, and sometimes we don't know ourselves. I would say that most likely we don't know the whole of the self, because of course the self is developing all the time. Therefore, thank goodness we don't know it all, because there's more to come. There is more to come. So what they suggest, with Winnicott and Phillips suggest, is that it is the process, it's not the outcome. So even in a piece of art, what artists will tell you is how much they learned in making it, and the next one will be different because they've learned. So it's the process of making. And I'm not going into the business of play for children and child development, because it would be too long. But something I like about this concept is that creativity is about a creative relation to the world. Now, what does it mean by that? What is creative in how you relate to the world? Well, what is creative is that you are responding from within. So you don't have the inhibitions of what the world imposes on you. And that applies to education, for example. So you can have a creative relation to the world when you are connecting with your true self. The opposite would be an inhibiting relationship to the world, or an acting out as in kind of jumping too quick without reflecting. So this relationship to the world is a deliberate action versus inhibition. So you are deliberate. That's why children are pretty good, and sometimes they go over the top. And we need to kind of restrain them. But the idea is to be aware of the possible inhibitions and to limit them as much as possible. And all this comes from the inner space, comes from the inside. And this is what neuroscience describes as the flow. Sometimes you don't know what you are doing and why you are doing it. Writers say that. They say, goodness, I didn't know this character would do or would say that. So the flow is kind of literally the inner running and inhibiting of the self. So that is if you are very lucky, and you might not be so lucky. And let's have a look at the unmade bed. I was very envious of Tracy Amy. Goodness me, I have my unmade bed and I don't show it to the world. I spent thousands of pounds in therapy to sort out my bed, and she shows it to the world. And good job. I mean, good for her. She was very brave. However, looking at this picture, you wouldn't think that she is very sorted inside. And she will say it, and she said it at the time, and there will be better times. So what I'm saying is that conflicts, inner conflicts, internal conflicts, get in the way of our creativity. And this is an example of that. Another artist who shows us her conflict is Louise Bourgeois. You know, the one with the big spiders? Mm-hmm. Now, she was a very prolific woman. In 74, so she must have been 60 at the time she made this piece. Now, it's called The Destruction of the Father. And she reads, the children took him apart, dismembered him, ate him up, and so he was liquidated. The same way he liquidated his children. That's pretty heavy stuff. But again, she is an artist, so she works with it. She doesn't suffer and gets tortured. He just works with it and expresses it and goes through it. Now, she produced this painting after the death of her husband. So it is not simply an expression of her conflict as a child. And what tends to happen with trauma is that it gets reawakened. So her father was a philanderer, apparently, and he had lots of affairs, and when she discovered them, she was distraught and lost faith in her father. Trauma might have been reawakened when her husband died. And she produced this, which is quite a gruesome picture. But as I said, good for her that she was able to express it. She was in therapy. She had psychoanalysis for 30 years, so she was quite clued up as to what was happening and how to go about it. So, as I said, if you are lucky, you play. If you are unlucky, like most of us are, you deal with the conflict, with the inner conflict that we have. And I don't know if you are familiar with Melanie Klein, and a successor, Hannah Segal, works on Melanie Klein on the object creations. An object is not as a thing. Sorry, I think this is quite intense. It gets warm when you are passionate about these things. Now, the objects are not objects, they are people. So for Melanie Klein and for Hannah Segal, they are talking about significant, very significant other. It could be family, it could be a partner. So their presentation is that we all deal with aggression. We all generate aggression. And they talk about the infant, the little baby, who looks so cute, actually has a lot of aggression. And it will throw tantrums, it will poo, it will scream. Now, we don't know because the babies cannot tell us. It's only through studies of adults that they come to the conclusion that we humans generate a lot of aggression. And sometimes, in fact, this aggression and this hatred, in inverted commas, is against the loved ones. So it's nearly as if it is the two sides of the relationship. So, what happens to the poor baby is that it gets frightened of this aggression, this kind of, it gets frightened of acting out this aggression. So it feels frightened, not only of its own aggression, but of possible retaliation from the mother. So the mother said, okay, you scream, I won't feed you. If you poo, I won't clean you. Now, as I said, I repeat, it's important to say that the baby doesn't think these things. We know about these things when they get repeated in adult life, and psychoanalysts study this. So, don't you worry, this is not the end of the story. There is a way out of it, which is the reparation. So the self feels guilty and accepts, well, first of all, it accepts that aggression rather than denying it. Oh, no, me angry, of course not. So the acceptance of this aggression leads to a desire to repair. So this is where reparation comes in. So rather than defending against aggression and denying it, a way out is to acknowledge it, but to repair. So what we do, if we are lucky, and if we are not so good at it, we go to the therapist, and if we are artists, we produce pieces of work that we show the world. So we repair this inner internal object and recreate a new object. So we recreate a new relationship with the world and relationship with the object, the mother, the father, the whatever. And this repairs our inner self and the relationship, and it contributes to the world because it produces a fantastic piece of art, like the spider, as we'll see later, the spider with Louis Bourgeois. Now, let me check the time. Yeah, we are okay. Symbolism, the symbol is the creation, and then there is the object and the subject, as it were. The object, which is the mother, the father, and the subject, which is the self. Now, we need to distinguish between object and symbol. Otherwise, we are in trouble. Otherwise, we get paranoid. Because imagine an artist who produces a fantastic piece of art, thinking that that is the object. And this wonderful ceramic breaks. Now the subject, the person, would have a breakdown because the object has been broken again. So through psychic work, we can differentiate between object and symbol. So yes, I'm writing a novel and I feel much better. However, that's not my mother or my father or my husband. It is a symbol of the work I am doing internally. And well, that's it. So if I'm lucky and I do all these things, then I've contributed to the world a piece of art. Fantastic. Is that too heavy? Is this too heavy to swallow? It's okay. Carry on. Yeah. Now, I've given you the easy way of creativity and the difficult way of creativity, and I'm showing you some pictures by Louis Bourgeois. There was a retrospective exhibition at the Hayward Gallery last year, and you can see that she was about 80 when she produced this work, so it's not early work. She was very conscious. It's not as if she didn't know what she was doing. She was very conscious of what she was doing, but she had the maturity of just putting it out there for the world to see. So you can see, oh, and it was mainly fabrics. So it was fabrics because Louis Bourgeois was born in a family that repaired tap tapestries, kind of valuable tapestries, and made garments with fabric. So she uses, for this exhibition, she uses textiles. So this is just a subject with a crutch. So you can see the damage. You can see the hurt self in there, who is held by the crutch. Let's have next one. Now, this is similar. This is quite disturbing. It wasn't a pleasant, beautiful, conventionally beautiful exhibition, really. It was quite difficult. This is a couple with no hands, no heads, and you can see that there is a prosthetic kind of leg in there, and it's expressing the damage, the difficulty of relationships. And this, I think, is the woman, because of the added pressures on women in the world. And it's called couple, so this is a couple. Yeah. Equally, this is the same, it's a couple as well with a harness. So you can see that it's nearly like she understands what is happening inside her, and now she tells us, she just shows us, being very aware of the damage and the reparation. Now, these are just quotes, and I just like them. She says, if I'm positive, I will join it. If I'm negative, I will cut things. My mother was a restorer. She repaired broken things. I don't do that. I destroy things. I must destroy, rebuild, destroy again. Don't be alarmed. It's okay to destroy. It's okay to destroy because you repair. And it gets destroyed again, so you repair again. And she was saying that in her family, all women used needles. And I always have fascination with the needle. The magic power of the needle to repair the damage. It's a claim to forgiveness. So you forgive the object, you forgive yourself. It's never aggressive, it's not a pin. The needle is reparative. Now, more pictures of this exhibition. You can see, it's called Lady in Waiting. It's a woman waiting, we don't know what for her opportunity in the world, maybe. You can see it's framed in a very old window, and she is held, it's not a very good photo, she's held by metal ropes. Now, another cell. There were lots of cells. Cells 25. The view of the world of the jealous wife. So the jealous wife is very pretty, nice clothes, but she's imprisoned, probably in this jealousy, in this hatred. And now this is an interesting one. It made me shudder a bit. However, she calls it the good mother. So, the woman who feeds and provides. So, out of her breasts, there is all these reels of cotton. So she's providing some reparation. And this is just a simple, it wasn't titled, this is not titled. This is probably reflecting her background, the tapestry. And it could male, female, it's not gruesome, it's just how it was. Now, so we've gone through play, we've gone through the tough thing of object relations. How can we inspire ourselves to be creative? And Anthony Storr is another psychoanalyst. He died he died a while ago, and he, in a way, repeats the concept of Winnicott, that the development of the personality is ongoing. It never ends, it keeps going. And talks about inspiration and active imagination or reverie. Many writers, as I said, many artists, painters as well, say that inspiration sometimes comes from this twilight in terms of awakeness and sleep. It's like when you have no restraints, you let your imagination run and flow. So it provides you new ideas, new vistas, new problems, but new solutions to these new problems. And you discover things that you didn't know about. And something very nice, if we have time later, we'll read the quote. The interaction of outer happenings and inner experience. And what he's saying is, when we are in nature and we like the view, or when we are in a museum and we love this piece of art, what is happening is that order of the external world suits our internal world. And it happens the other way around too. When we are in a good mood, things are nice, things look much nicer. When we are in a bad mood, everything looks messy. So now it comes to you as spectator. That's what, in fact, one of the elements I suggested for this talk was, what is our reaction to a piece of art? And as I said, I like clay, and somehow it makes sense. Somehow it does really soothe me. In terms of literature, for example, not in terms of visual arts, because we cannot amend the painting, but in terms of literature, actually the reader is changing the story. There are many stories. That's the. Do you remember Captain Corelli's mandolin? I thought the ending was absolutely ridiculous, but it doesn't matter. He's given us his ending. You can create your own ending. And it does, and that's why there are reading groups where people read a novel and then discuss. So the spectator is not totally passive, he has an active role as well. So obstacles to creativity, they can be psychological, as we've seen, and we have plenty of those, all of us do. They could be institutional. It could be that the institution, the place where we work or we study, or the city council are restricting us in what we want to do and what we should do. And of course there are societal. Well, I don't need to say anything on that. I don't need to say anything about how the world is restricting our creativity. And now, a good ending. So, Tracy had a very unmade, very messy bed, and went through a lot of pain. And then she emerged, and then she was able to create her own art. And these paintings are her own creation. The better sorted self is able to create something meaningful to her and to us. So I think it's and she looks good in there. Now, Louise Bourgeois, she called the spider Mama, and she talks about the mother as a spider and the spider as a repairer, because apparently, she said, apparently if you knock a spider web, the spider will repair it, because it produces kind of silky juices to repair it. Now, I was talking about the external world, and I like David Nash at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and he uses wood, and it's interesting here, the dialogue. He says, my dialogue with wood is endless. In fact, we are in a wonderful park with trees, and this is a tree. This piece of wood was a tree, and he has transformed the tree into this, but also he is communing with the world, with the natural world. I like it. And this is just to bring you to a happy end. This is a cactus, very small cactus, and as you can see, very squat and very spiny. And I don't know, I like it, I bought it. It's very small, it's about this big. And in the spring, one day, I see that a flower starts shooting through, and it produced this beautiful flower. And I thought, goodness, if this squat cactus can produce this beautiful flower, we all can get through our troubles. I'm sure we can get through our troubles. So I think it is inspiring, really. And this is the end. I put in here the authors in case you are interested in following up. Adam Phillips is a psychoanalyst, and he's written lots of books on very interesting subjects. He's a Freudian, but very developed and very evolved Freudian. And Hannah Segal was a psychoanalyst, and she died in 2011, and she was, I think, the chair of the British Psychological Society for a number of years. And Anthony Storr, another psychiatrist, a Jungian. The three main schools of psychoanalysis are Freudian, Kleinian, and Jungian. And Jung is a bit spiritual for my liking. But anyway, here you are. So those are the mentors I have had, and this is my email address, and I've got a website, which is my name, Mercedes Fonfria, who my husband kindly produced for me, and you can see more information in there. And I think this is it. So now it's you. Comments, questions?
I'll talk about the word art. What is art? In Greek, is technical. Okay? The ancient Greek word didn't have two words for art. Okay? It included the creative and the practical. So if you take an ancient Greek capital like the Doric order, or the Ionic order, or the Corinthian order, the capital, what holds the top of a classical column? That is technique. It's both practical, it holds the building up, it's aesthetic, it's symbolic, it's spiritual, it includes mathematics, it's everything. In the modern world, we have split the word art. There is fine art, conceptual art, psychological art, and all the things you were talking about, Mercedes, from the other points of view, from psychoanalysis, from the health of the person and all that. So we live in the 21st century, and we understand art in a very different way as older people, more ancient people understood it. But me, it's everything. It's conceptual art, psychological art, representation art, but also the idea of creation, of making things useful in a direct way and less useful in another way. It may be useful for the soul, as you said, but it's also, why shouldn't it be useful for somebody who holds a beautiful implement and uses it? To me, a beautiful axe is a work of art, but it's also creative, it's also a tool. So it's all these things, and that's what I wanted to say. I agree with what you said, but you've taken one aspect of art, and we need to consider it all together. It's only, in the 19th century when they said, this is fine art, and the other isn't fine art. Well, so these are my thoughts. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, there's so much. In fact, Andrew can invite you to do another talk on this element, this aspect of art.
Technical. They don't like this, oh, it's only a technician. Isn't important. But to me, a technical person is as important as any other person.
Hi, so my question is really, I wondered from the point of psychoanalysis, whether you've seen the development of social pressure on individuals to create art, whether you've noticed that as a change reflected in the type of art that we produce, because living today we seem to be in such extremes of social pressure or social influence.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's why I said obstacles can be institutional and societal. In preparing this, I stumbled across Damien Hirst, and one of his work was the skull forged, if that's the word, in platinum and studied with diamonds. And I thought, flipping hell, if you excuse the language, really, is this what we need, and what is this saying about the politics of the world? Another of his work is the pharmacy, and it is criticizing the pharmaceutical world. But in order to do that, he recreated at the Tate model a whole room which represents a pharmacy, stacked with shelves and all medicines. And again, I thought, actually, if you spend that money having workshops at your local museum or art gallery for children or for adults, the world probably would be better. Because, of course, I'm not defending the pharmaceutical world. You don't need to make a room. You can have a video. You can criticize the pharmaceutical world in other ways. So, what is happening now with the arts? Well, the arts is the arts, but we have to think of the artist, we have to think of the market. A lot of art is a commodity that is bought and sold and collected. But there are so many aspects that we could be talking about.
I think I'm just following on from that. I'm thinking of the idea that art is a special and separate thing, and actually you're talking on creativity, and I think that there's an aspect of creativity which you know, and there's art, and they're not necessarily the same thing. We had an exhibition earlier on this year, which was a local. Anybody can submit anything. Two things came out of that to me. One is people coming along saying, oh, I love to paint and draw, but I'm not an artist because I'm not very good. And to which I usually say, well, I think you'll find, you probably are. And the other one was...
Can you hear over there?
Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, I've got a very loud voice. I'm standing up this time.
Yes.
The other one was people coming along and saying art is so important to my mental health. Now, what I'm suggesting is that I'm a painter, and I've always painted and drawn. That's it. I think it's an activity that I do, and sometimes what I do turns into art because people are prepared to stick it on the wall and buy it. But most of the time, it ends up in my attic. It's just something that I do as a process. Very interesting subjectivity in that if you have 8 or 10, 12 people in a room, and you give them all a piece of paper, and you give them an identical mark-making tool and say, make a mark, draw a picture, they'll all produce something totally different and unique. And to me, that's all, that's all art. And you were talking about the obstacle to art, and I think the biggest obstacle is, or the obstacle to creativity, the biggest obstacle is the idea that it's somehow a special activity which is done by special people who have special talents and are somehow qualified in a special way, and therefore it's worth a lot of money. Actually, it's something that everybody does all the time in different ways.
Absolutely. And I wonder whether art schools help or hinder the creativity of the students. But again, that's another thing. Any more comments, questions? Sorry.
I recently realised that my son, who has ADHD, my son has ADHD.
Closer to your mouth.
Right. And I realised a few days ago how his creativity had been totally restricted by not being able to be employed because of other health issues. I realised that his little dens that he built out in the countryside had been destroyed because they'd had to clear the land. And because of not working, where he was always very creative, sometimes pushing the limits, as they do, he's now quite seriously ill, mentally ill. And I've realised the role of creativity for people with ADHD and that having an outlet is absolutely essential to their mental health. And we know that many people who are in prison have ADHD. So they need employment, they need an outlet, because otherwise, mentally, they are completely screwed. That is my understanding now, is that it is important. And on the comment that you made about everyone being creative, I've realised in recent years, we're all creative. We all learn how to live. We have to be creative in our everyday living of existence, especially in these times. So thank you, Mercedes. I've learned a lot today.
That's why there is occupational therapy for people with mental health difficulties.
I was just going to make a comment, probably quite a dark comment, about separating the art from the artist, and what about these artists that have done awful things in their lives? You know, there's lots of examples, and whether you can still enjoy their art.
Ooh, difficult.
I'm just going to say to you, I had this conversation with somebody fairly recently. If you, I think you respond to, I might need that, I might not. You respond to art as it is. I'm quite interested when I produce. My work lives somewhere between representation and abstraction, and quite often I'll produce a painting and somebody will look at it and they'll see things in it that I have no idea were in there. So they're just responding. And you know, if you go back to McLuhan, the medium's a message. And in fact, the meaning of a work of art, I think, lies with the viewer, not with the artist. I have no idea what a lot of the meanings that I put into things are. It's an expression of my subjective world. Now, having said that, if you don't know what sort of person an artist was, when you look at their work and think, oh, that's great, and then you find out something about the artist, you're responding to an extrinsic value, not an intrinsic value. It's like liking a chair because Napoleon sat on it or something like that. Actually, if you find out about most artists throughout history, and a good many writers, quite a lot of them were awful people. Quite a lot of artists were terrible people, and they did all sorts of things that maybe in their time were acceptable. Now we think were, you know, a bit naughty. Are you going to let that colour all art? Do you need to learn about all those artists and everything they did before you can make a judgment on their art? I would say not.
You want to say something?
Sorry.
Well, I think your point is very important. Do you remember Wagner and his associations with the Nazis, and something that Daniel Barenboim, who is a Jew but a progressive Jew and critical of Zionism and supporter of Palestinians, he said in one, in fact he was given an award, and he used the speech during the award to denounce the policies, the military interventions of Israel. And he said, however, you are free to listen to this music. You don't have to. If it has too dreadful associations for you, don't listen to it. But it might be that for some people, say, to hell with you, and again, sorry for the colloquial language, to hell with what you did, I like what you've produced. Picasso is another one. Picasso, he was a womanizer, he destroyed women, he used women, and yet his work is his work. So I think it's very important to differentiate between, well, again, what we were saying with the symbolism, the piece of work can come from reparation of the artist or from acting out of the artist. A lot of current representation, not current, forever, representation of women, I cringe with Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, remember, the French? Here you are, all these men dressed up to here and the women naked. Why? So that infuriates me because it contributes to the sexualization of women's body. So yeah, there are so many elements, but I think that is a very important. In fact, let's take this to an extreme. Imagine a very skilled, which links with what Costa says about technos, which is what we would call these days skill. Imagine a very skilled painter producing paintings of abuse of children and women. That doesn't come from a liberated self. It comes from a destructive self. And we wouldn't want, although there is in there, I mean, there is a lot of what is called art, in fact pornography, that's not in the subject. Well, creativity, I mean, you can create pieces that are oppressive, and therefore you denounce. So anyway, that's a very, very important point. Anything else? No? Well, I think you've done very well. You've been here for 50 minutes. You've done very well. I hope it was useful to you, and thank you very much. And thank you to the Art Gallery for providing these free talks.